All right, we're back. And we are game 1014 in the winter 2017 semester. And week one, part two of our broadcasts. We just did a bit of setup in the first one in terms of our team. And now we're going to kind of do some setup with some tool sets that I recommend to build out your game. Now, again, like I said, the stuff that I'm talking about today is a recommendation. It's not you need to do this, of course. You're the masters of you're the people who are the tech specialists or the tech engineers in the team are the people that are going to decide how you're going to build out your game. You may want to use something else. But for me, what I want to do is strengthen your JavaScript knowledge and give you an opportunity to use some tools to help you, to build out this application and any other one that you want to build out in JavaScript. All right, so we talked about Create.js, but we need to get Create.js. And there's a couple ways to get this. I can always download Create.js. If I go to download, you can see that there's several links here. But this is a very poor way to get all of our libraries, okay? If you're the kind of person that goes to the actual site and downloads everything, then, it's okay to do this, but the best way to do that is through a package manager. And we're going to talk about package managers as well today. And if you don't know what that is, it's okay, because we're going to go, thank you for that. With the package manager, what we're going to be doing is I'm going to show you how to get the libraries that are live, as opposed to you going and downloading things manually. We don't do that anymore, all right, typically. Also, when we set websites up, because remember, this is your site. Eventually, your web game should be live somewhere, right? Usually what I do is I use continuous integration from GitHub, okay? So that's something else we're going to be talking about this semester, and that's why we're showing you GitHub. You need to know GitHub in order for you to use continuous integration. By the way, does anyone have an idea of where they're going to host their game eventually? Because you're going to have to do that at some point, right? Yes? Where are you going to host your game? Squarespace, right? The other thing you can do is, a lot of times, Microsoft Azure is also a good choice. And I'm putting it out there only because, as students, you have access to something called Microsoft Imagine. And you can apply for a free account with Microsoft for a year, and they give you space for free for a year. And it's actually a pretty good service, pretty easy to do. There's also a bunch of other services out there, and even the GitHub extension, the GitHub pack, the education pack that I gave you, there's other services there that you get, you get access, and you can create either a VM out there or some other hosting solution for your game. But for today, what we're talking about is, how do I get this package? How do I set up my template? Let's set up a template for for JavaScript and for our game. If you're going to start from the beginning, if you already have a prototype, it's okay. I'm just going to show you yet another way to do that. First of all, you need to download and install Visual Studio Code. And this is the code editor that I use of choice. Visual Studio Code, the great thing about this is it's not Visual Studio, first of all, right? It's a code editor, right? Visual Studio Code is cross-platform, works on Mac and Windows, which is a good thing. So you can use it whether you're a Mac person or a Windows person, it doesn't matter, right? It's not Visual Studio, right? And it's not Visual Studio Lite. It's not about that. It's a code editor. And the great thing is, it's very similar to something like, if you've seen other code editors like Atom out there, there's Brackets, Sublime, it's very similar to that, right? So it's lightweight, it's quick, and we use it in the industry for making all kinds of web applications, not just games, okay? I'll tell you right now, I never use Notepad++ to make websites, ever, right? Not because I don't know how to use, HTML and CSS and all that kind of stuff. It's not about that, or even JavaScript. It's because I can do it faster with a code editor that has good code hinting. And that's the reason why I do it. It's a cost measure more than anything else. All right? So again, do you have to use Visual Studio Code? Do you have to use Sublime Text? Do you have to use anything else other than Notepad++? No. You can use Notepad++ if that's what you feel comfortable doing. And if that's what everyone else is doing, it's totally fine. I'm going to be using Visual Studio Code to give you some extra code here. So please download that now or follow along with your code editor. Now, you're going to see that there's advantages in using that. Stuff that I can do with Visual Studio Code, your code editor may or may not have the capability. All right, so I've got Visual Studio Code right here. And again, if you haven't got it or you're going to get it later or you can't follow along, you can always watch the video later on, okay? One thing to do with Visual Studio Code or any other code editor like this is you need to kind of have some kind of solution folder, right? So I'm going to create a new folder on my desktop here, right? And again, I'm just going to call it Game 1014 and then Winter 2017. Lesson 1, okay? It doesn't really matter. I could also call it the Create.js boilerplate. But for now, it's okay that we just have some name for it. Then, the great thing about Visual Studio Code, drag and drop. I can drag and drop this and now I have direct access to my solution folder. So if I look at my solution, all these buttons here, basically, they on the left-hand side for Visual Studio Code, they give you access to things like GitHub Direct. It's actually integrated into Visual Studio Code. There's also a debugger, and there's also extensions that you can download and install for Visual Studio Code, or VS Code. All right, so we've got an empty project. Let's do a little bit of a review for those people who's awesome with HTML. Anybody? Like who's really comfortable? You might be really comfortable with HTML. Is there anyone else really comfortable with HTML? Did you guys learn HTML last semester or anything like that? So we're going to do a bit of a review today, okay? And for people who've done HTML before, please forgive me. I'm not trying to, if I'm a little bit slow in the beginning, I'm trying to patch up all the holes for everybody else who's not a great programmer or who's just learned HTML and CSS and all that stuff. First of all, what I always want you to do when we work together, right, if you're going to follow along, is let's keep the same folder structure, right? You might disagree with some of the naming conventions that I'm gonna come up with. It's okay. I'm just going to show you my way of doing it. Let's create 3 folders, and that's my recommendation. The first folder that I'm going to create right now, if I right-click inside this space here, I can create a folder. The first folder is going to be the assets folder. This is probably where I'm going to have everything from audio, images, everything that I'm going to have in there is going to be in the assets folder. I might even have subfolders in here from a folder structure perspective to set this up. So I might have an images folder underneath this and an audio folder if I want to go there, right? Again, when we work on the web, because making things on the web is the most difficult platform, in my opinion, to work for, right? And the reason why is because the web changes so often. It's not as maybe as stable, let's say, as C#, Java, or C++. They're more stable platforms when you're developing software. But the web is a very unstable platform. It continuously changes. I'm gonna add some other folders here. So here's another folder. So we're gonna call it the content folder. Usually, content, the way I look at it is where I'm going to keep my CSS. Right? I'm not calling it CSS, and there's reasons for this. Another folder I'm going to put together is my scripts folder. So all my scripts, all my JavaScripts, anything else that I want to have in there are all going to go in my scripts folder, right? As well as all my libraries. I'm going to have a subfolder called lib that I'm going to put in my scripts folder, and that's how I'm going to organize my project. Now, we need a manifest. Whenever we make a web game, we need a manifest. What's the manifest, or the way your web game kicks off? What is the main thing that your web game needs? Guys, what was that? An index.html. That's your manifest. Everything should link into that. Now, there's different ways of doing this, but this is the way I'm going to show you is the simpler way to do it, okay? So I'm going to create a new file, and it's going to be an index.html file. All right, index.html. If I'm going to make any HTML page, what is the first thing I need from my index.html? Doc type. Thank you very much. So I'm going to go in here and start typing doc type. Doc type is HTML, of course. Okay, cool. Now, the great thing about Visual Studio Code, and like I said, it gives you code hinting, but it also has something else built in called Emmet. All right? I'm going to bring up Emmet to show you what that is. Emmet. Emmet, my friends, is a series of shortcuts to create your HTML faster. Right? So when I want to do any kind of templating or anything like that, I use Emmet. Emmet is cross-platform, and it's also used in other text editors as well. There are some really cool syntax shortcuts that you can use. And it looks very similar to what a CSS selector statement would be like, right? Okay, let me show you some Emmet here. So I want to set up the wrapper for my entire page, and that is the HTML tag, yeah? Inside the HTML tag, what are the two tags, the two main tags that are in every HTML page? Head and body. Okay, let's do that. So contains head plus body, right? When I do this, and if I press tab, I get my head and body, right? So a really quick way of doing that. Head plus body, if I press tab, right? But you can go further than this with Emmet. And again, this is just kind of an ancillary technology that we're going to be talking about today. I can also use order of operations for this kind of thing. So I can have, well, the head should contain a title, right? And it might also contain, I'm just going to put this in brackets here again, an extra bracket. Oops. Head can also contain some meta tags, right? So maybe we'll have a meta tag for the viewport and for character sets. So here's other meta tags they can have in here, right? And in my body tag, I'm going to have, especially for Create.js, I need a canvas element, right? So I'm going to, my body tag should contain a canvas element. For now, I'm going to give it an ID of canvas, right? And when I press the tab button, I get this. So a really quick way of scaffolding or scratching out a simple web page using Emmet. Okay, that's the technology that I'm using right now. It's built into Visual Studio Code. There's nothing for you to download. However, if you have another editor you really like Brackets or Sublime or Notepad++, it's all available. Emmet is available for all those editors. Okay? Okay, this is just the basics, but I need to add some additional details in here. For example, in my HTML, I want to say that my language, localization-wise, is English, right? My meta tag, my first meta tag is going to be the character set meta tag. I'm going to make it UTF-8, right? And the second meta tag is really the one that I'm going to use for my viewport, because when I make my web game, I want it to make sure that it's compatible. Maybe I want to make my web game work responsibly, so it works on different devices, right? Or adapts to different viewport sizes. To prepare for that, and just in case you want to do that, I kind of use name is equal to viewport, and then content is equal to width is equal to device dash width out today. And then initial scale is equal to 1. So what this basically says is the width property of my page is actually the device width, whatever the device is. If it's your desktop, it's the size of your browser. If it's a mobile device, it's the viewport size, whatever that is.
And all these are shortcuts based on this Emmet?
No, these meta tags I'm writing them by hand. The only shortcuts I used were the tags. That's all I did, right? The title tag should be the title of your game or your main title of your menu screen, but typically it's the title of your game. I'm just going to call this, again, Create.js demo, because that's what we're doing today, right? Underneath my title, I'm probably going to have a CSS section. So this is any kind of CSS that you're going to have in your game. For the most part, when we do web games, the CSS is minimal, all right? Because most of our stuff that we're going to be doing is JavaScript. Everything that we're going to be doing is with JavaScript games. James, you're shaking your head. Do you disagree?
No CSS.
No CSS, right? Yeah. And the reason for that is because really we wanted JavaScript to really detail how our game flows. Everything that happens is with JavaScript. Okay. But we're going to put it in there because we may want to align our canvas element. Our canvas element is where my game is going to kind of live and breathe and die, right? Now you can also make a game with WebGL. That's another option for a web game. But right now, if I'm not wrong, you guys are learning Canvas, right? How to make a game with Canvas, and that's what I'm going to focus on as well. So this is our CSS section. We're going to fill this in a second. Okay, here's my canvas element. This is where my game is going to live, within this canvas element, right? I'm going to assign a width for now. That's an attribute. I'm going to make it 640. You can make it whatever you like for your game, right? And my height is going to be 480. So I'm kind of adapting a smaller screen size for now. You guys can make it 800 by 600, 1024 by 768. Whatever you choose to make is fine with me, right? But this is where your canvas is going to your game is going to live in here. Underneath your canvas, I'm going to have a JavaScript section. Your JavaScript section is going to have all the links to all of your code, right? So all your code is going to be under here. Okay, from a review perspective, why not put my JavaScript in the head of my document, right? How come I won't do that? Anybody?
So the body?
Yeah, why don't I put my JavaScript and the JavaScript links, the scripts in my JavaScript in the head of my document? Right, so I want to wait till the page is loaded, and then I want my JavaScript. Now, typically that's true, but because we usually wait for the actual content of the page to load. And the other reason why that's true is if your JavaScript messes up, your page won't load, right? That's a problem, right? I don't want my page not to load. You know, I want to see something. It's not going to really help me in this case because your JavaScript is your game. So if it doesn't load, then that's okay because it means you have an error, right? But in this case, for best practices, when you make any website whatsoever, you want to kind of put, for the most part, your JavaScript in the lower half of your code. All right, so this is where my JavaScript is going to live and die. This is, in fact, where my libraries are going to be and my custom JavaScript. All right. So part of our boilerplate, not really complete. Okay, I want to put a couple more files in here. So in my content folder, I'm going to right-click and put a new file in there. We're going to call it game.css, right? So any kind of CSS for the game is going to live in here. And the one piece of CSS I want to put in there is going to say something like this: any canvas that's on my game, any canvas element right now is going to have a border of 1 pixel solid black. All right. So I want to kind of give my canvas a border that I can see, right? Because in the beginning, your canvas is going to be white and empty, right? And I want to be able to identify where my canvas is on the screen. Okay. Scripts. I'm going to do a new file. And under my scripts, I'm just going to include right now a game.js, right? Now you can expand this later on, of course, and you will, right? But for now, my game.js, I'm going to create something called an IFI. Anyone know what an IFI is? This is new stuff for you guys. If you've never done JavaScript before, if you've only done a little bit of JavaScript, you won't know what an IFI is. Anybody know? It's actually the shortcut for immediately invoked function expression, right? It's actually a closure. And we're going to do that first. Why would I want to make a closure happen first? If you're a programmer, if you're a technical lead, you should know this answer. Why? In JavaScript. If you don't know, it's okay. Anybody have an idea, clue, a guess? Because what it does is it hides all the variables from your users, actually, right? You don't want to expose things like your high score and give people control of your game, right? Because they can just change stuff and go to the next level. They can mess things up. If you hide stuff inside of a closure, they only have access to the stuff that you expose. All right? So in the beginning, all I want to do is create a closure. And the way the closure syntax looks is this. So if we're going to create an IFI, that's what it is, which is an immediately invoked function expression. That's what it is. And the IFI is going to look like this. Here's my function, right? That's the JavaScript function syntax. And then I'm going to immediately invoke it. Okay. Remember, we invoke functions in JavaScript with the round brackets. Okay. So in here, in the curly braces, this is where your code is going to live. So anything in here is automatically executed, right? It gets immediately executed by these brackets. It's almost like it self-executes. Another way to call this thing is an anonymous self-executing function. Right. That's what it is. Right. Inside my IFI, I'm going to put in just the console command for now. We're going to do a console log. And in my console log, I'm going to put in something like game started. All right, just for now. We're going to move this around in a bit. Right? All right, this is good. But so far, if I was to run my code right now, would it do anything? No. Why? You haven't linked the JavaScript file. Correct. I have to link the JavaScript file into my index.html. I've kind of made a placeholder for it, but I haven't done anything there. And I want to link my CSS into my HTML as well. Remember, your HTML5 or HTML code, index.html in this case, is the manifest, the program, the driver for all of your code, right? So in my CSS section, I want to put a link, right? I just press tab there for that. And what I want to do is I want to get the path from my game.css. And again, it would be /content /game.css. Okay? And the same thing goes with my script. So I'm going to have my script file, script tag. My source attribute for my script is going to point to the path for my script, which is going to be, again, /scripts, if I can spell, and /game.js. So this is going to link everything together. Will it do something now? Hopefully it will, right? Now the great thing about JavaScript, the way we have it right now, we haven't done any kind of nothing inside the canvas. The canvas is going to be empty right now, and it's not doing anything in our game, right? Because we really don't have a game yet. All we have is a document that has a little bit of CSS and one line of code, right? But the best way to do that is if I wanted to go into, right now, into my game, and if I double-clicked on my index.html, right, it should bring up a page, right? And if I refresh, we should be able to see the canvas. Well, how come we can't see the canvas? Should. Let's take a look at any kind of, let's inspect the actual page. I'm using Chrome here, right? And if I look at the console, I see that I have a couple of issues. One is content game.css, not finding that. And I want to talk about this in a second, right? And scripts game.js, not finding that either. How come? What did I do wrong? Did I do anything wrong? Okay, well, let's take a look at my code again. So here's my scripts, right? I'm pointing to scripts in game.js, and then here, my CSS, and here's my content game.css. How come it's not working? Okay, that's a good way of doing it, right? I could have also just put content, by the way. But if I do /, and if I go back to this and refresh, right, I should see this now. So this is my canvas. My canvas has been outlined. This is where my game is going to live and die, inside the canvas element, right? And for most canvas games, that's what's happening. Everyone good with this one? Okay, remember, if you can't do this right now, or if I'm going too fast for you, remember I am recording the session. You can always go back and take a look at it later. And also notice something else down here in the console, which is where I'm going to use all my debugging. Game started shows up, right? Because of my immediately invoked function expression. This immediately invoked function expression, this iffy here, this closure that we have, right? It gets immediately called, and then this single line of code here, console.log, right? It gets called, and that's why we see the game started. All right, this is a good start. I want to put this up on GitHub. Now, if you're a Windows user, there's a couple steps you need to take to make GitHub work for you, right? One, you need to install GitHub on your machine, right? Because most Windows machines, especially if you're using a Windows 10 machine, does not have GitHub installed by default, right? I don't recommend you use command prompt to do this. I recommend you use PowerShell, which is a little bit more robust, and it actually installs a little easier. So how do I do this? If you're a Windows user, you want to go up to GitHub, right? This is the first way. And instead of just going and grabbing GitHub, you can go to desktop. I can type it in desktop.github.com. There we go. And if you look at desktop.github.com, it gives you a tool, a user interface tool that actually allows you to put things up on GitHub. So if you're someone who hates command line and doesn't want to do that, desktop.github.com, you download a tool, and it'll allow you to push everything to your repo remote, okay? And we'll talk about what GitHub is in a second. The other way, of course, is to download and install Git on your machine. And if I search for Git, that's wrong. If I search for Git by itself, I'm going to go to git-scm.com, and I'll put that link inside Slack for you guys. So here's the Git link itself, right? And what this does is allows you to download and install Git for your Windows machine. If you're a Mac person, who's a Mac user in the class? Anybody? I got 2 people maybe. All right, those people have no issues because Git is installed automatically with Mac, right? It's on the console with Mac or in the terminal, right? But if you're a Windows user, you got to install Git by yourself, right? And the reason why I'm suggesting that you download it and use PowerShell is because when you install Git on the command line, on the command prompt, it'll say unrecognized command a lot of times if you try and do that. And here's the test. Try doing this. If you go to your command prompt, and I'm using terminal on the Mac, if I go git -- version after you've installed everything, it should give you some kind of version. If you try typing git on the command line or command prompt on your Windows machine, and it gives you unrecognized command, which most likely will happen, right? It's because there's 2 problems. One, either A, it hasn't been installed properly, or B, which is the most likely cause, you have to change your environment variables. You have to change your environment variable so it points to the installation directory. Does anyone know how to do that? Yeah, a couple people might know how to do that. If you're a technical lead, that's a good thing to know, right? So how do I do that? How do I change my environment variables so I make everything go? Well, for that, I have to launch my Windows virtual machine. So I'm going to kind of bring up Windows for a second. And I got a version of Windows 10 here that I'm going to pull up. And I'm going to show you where to go and look for your installation. Now, again, is it required that you do things with command line or command prompt? No, you can use a tool. And there's lots of tools out there that you can download to kind of connect with GitHub. Okay. Again, if I was going to search for my environment variables, I would click the Windows button down here on the left, and I would type in advanced system settings, right? So that's what I want to kind of see, advanced system settings. And if I want to view advanced system settings when it comes up in Windows 10, you'll see that there's a button down here for environment variables. Click on environment variables, and you can see on the path, there's two paths. There's one that's environment variables for me, and there's one that's environment variables or system variables for the system, anyone who logs into the system. My recommendation is, and if you look at the path, if I double click on it, you can see that there are several installations that I have on my Windows machine. What you want to do is you want to create a new installation, if it's not listed here, your Git installation, and point to the location of Git, and then press OK. That's going to fix your issue, right? And I've kind of done that here somewhere. Here it is right here. Here's GitHub, right? When I installed Git on my machine, I use GitHub to install Git, and this is where it lives on my machine. Users, Tom, app data, local, GitHub, and so on. And once I install this here in my environment variables in the path, right? And by the way, I did the same thing for this path, just so that it matches, right? Then you'll have access to Git with command prompt. And if I bring up command prompt for a second, if I type Git, then I'll see Git. And if I type CLS on the Windows side and go Git -- version, you can see that I have a Git version of 2.9.2, right? So Git is required for this course, right? And in order for you to install it, you need to have it set in your environment variables if you're downloading it direct. If you're using a tool, and by the way, for me and for other instructors, it doesn't really matter how you get your stuff up to Git, right? As long as you're using GitHub in the proper way. So what is GitHub and what is Git? Now, some of you may already know, but forgive me if I kind of tell you about it again, right? So actually, the best way to ask this question is, why do I use Git? What are the 3 reasons that I use Git and GitHub? Anyone know? How about I want to talk to the technical leads now. I'm talking to those people who are claiming to be the guys. Tell me.
So that you can control different versions of the game.
That's one reason. What's another reason? Collaborating. What's another reason? There's one more reason. It's kind of basic, right?
You can like branch different codes and.
That's more of like version control and code building. It's really backup, right? I like using Git for at least for backup. So the 3 reasons, the main reasons people use it is backup, right? So just in case something happens to your machine, if my machine burns and I'm working on my game with 10 people and I've got the main code base, guess what happens, right? We're in trouble, right? We don't want that to happen. So as we're building, one of the things we're doing here in game production, right, is one of the best tools as you're building your game out, and one of them is Git. If you don't have Git, you're in trouble. So backup is the first reason, I would say. The second reason is collaboration. And like as I mentioned earlier, Git and GitHub is one of the best ways to get recognized in the industry, especially if you're a developer and if you're creating code, not just someone who's using code, right? They're going to look at your GitHub account a lot of times when you do an interview, all right? And then say, show me your code, show me what you've done, right? GitHub is a great way of doing that. And collaboration means you can share your code and branch and do all those lovely things with your code base with your team. Yeah.
GitHub.
No. GitHub and Git are 2 different things. Git is the way we do backup, and that's locally to your machine. GitHub is a cloud service, right? It's a cloud service that is free, right, for the most part. And again, I'll go back to GitHub. I'm actually going to use incognito mode to get there so you can see what it looks like when you first log in, right? So here's GitHub. And what GitHub is, again, it offers software as a service, right? So really what it allows you to do is things like house your project up in the cloud, right? So that other people can get to it. If I set up Git locally, only I can get to it. It's stuck inside my machine, right? Now, again, there's other things you can do with GitLab and a bunch of other solutions out there that can free that situation. But for the most part, we need some place where you can collaborate. And one of the best places nowadays is the web, right? There's actually 2 main, I would say, or 3 main solutions for Git. One is GitHub. Another one is Bitbucket. I think it's a big one as well. And GitLab would be the other one. Those are the 3, right? So, but GitHub is by far the most popular, all right? Right, but like I said, you can get unlimited ones with your GitHub student pack, right? So I would agree with you. In many ways, Bitbucket, that's why we use Bitbucket, because you get a bunch of private repositories, right? So again, Git is the system that you'll be installing on your local hard drive. GitHub is the cloud service that you're going to be connecting to from your local hard drive, right? Okay. When we use Git and GitHub, we create something called a commit, right? A commit, I want you to think about a commit as like a snapshot. I create a snapshot of my code, right? And that code is going to be the code that I'm going to reference for any future changes, okay? So think of it that way. So my first piece of code that I make, like this little index.html that I put together just now, right? That doesn't do anything, right? This is going to be the first piece of code that I'm going to put up on GitHub, all right? So this is going to be, this is going to be almost like my code base where I'm going to start from. It's going to be in something that we're going to call the master branch. And we're going to talk about branching later on. For the beginning, what I want you to think about is this. I'm going to take my code locally. I'm going to create a commit, which is a snapshot of my code, right? Just like Windows does a snapshot of your code when it does any kind of recovery, right? It's the same idea. I'm going to take a snapshot of my code, my project, and its current state, right? And then after I've taken that snapshot, any changes I make, any features I add, I'm going to do another commit. Now, I can keep doing commits locally as much as I want, but at some point, I need to push those commits up to the cloud, right? And the way I'm going to do that is I need to create a remote connection, right? So there is the local Git repository, just to recap, and there's the remote cloud service GitHub that I'm going to be connecting with, okay? Is everyone clear on that? How about this one? Is everyone not clear on that? All right, let's do it. So I'll show you what I'm talking about. First, before I do anything, I need a Git repository to connect to, right, on the cloud. I can also do something locally first, but I like to start in the cloud first. I'm going to go up to GitHub, and I'm going to go to our George Brown College area that I've kind of created here. I'm going to create a new repository. There's new ways. Once you set up GitHub for the first time, you can create a new repository here, or you can click the plus button. I'm going to create my new repository here. It doesn't really matter. I have multiple organizations that I work with, so this is just one of them. My repository name has to be unique for my organization, for my account, okay? But it doesn't have to be unique between us. You and I can share the same repository name. It's okay. But for now, I'm just going to call it GAME1014, and again, it's winter 2017, and it's lesson 1. It's going to match the name of my project, okay? You don't have to do this, of course, but that's what I'm going to be doing. Notice that there's a check mark. Check mark means that this name, the repository name that I'm creating up online, is available for me to create within my organization. I'm going to click Create Repository now. Don't check anything else. Don't make it private for now. I'm not going to also initialize a README file because that means that my README file would only exist on the cloud service and not locally. So I don't have a README file locally. Create repository. When I do this, GitHub is going to give you a series of instructions of what to do, right, to connect to it, right? I'm not going to do all of them like this, but very, very close. Let's go back to Visual Studio Code for a second. All right, and again, Windows, Mac. It's the same. When it comes to what I'm going to be doing now, the steps are almost identical. All right. So here I am with my code, right? Now within Visual Studio Code, the great thing is I can, inside the body of my solution down here, I can right-click and I can open in Terminal or on the Windows operating system, open in Command Prompt, right? When I do this, I automatically swim to the path of where my project lies. All right, so I'm already there. I don't have to do any CD commands locally to Windows. I don't have to go CD, Thomas, users, desktop, on my project. I don't have to do that. It automatically takes you there, right? This is one way of doing it. If you're not using Visual Studio Code, however, and you need to go into your project to create your Git repository for the first time. So the other way to do that, I'm just going to close this off for a second. The other way to do that is actually in Windows or on the Mac. I'm just going to kind of close all these windows off for a second. I'm going to bring up my command prompt for a second, or terminal, right? I can also do this, Windows or Mac. If I go CD space, and then if I drag and drop my folder into my terminal, it'll actually take me to the exact same location. Here's Windows. And just to show you that I'm capable of doing the same thing, so copy this one. I'm going to kind of populate it over here. Same code, right? There it is. And if I go, and this is on the Windows side, CD space, and then a drag and drop, right? Enter, it does the same thing. For Windows, Mac, doesn't matter how you get there. You need to get into your folder, your project folder. If you don't get into your project folder, you can't create a repository for the project. You might create a repository somewhere else, but it won't be relative to your project. So that's number one. Next, the commands. Remember, we had a series of commands that GitHub gave us, these commands here, right? We're going to do those commands in order, kind of. One, I don't really want to echo and create a README file. I don't really care for a README file at this juncture, so I'm not going to do that. But the next one, git init, I want to do. So git init, I'm going to type that in. And I recommend you do this with me if you can, and press enter. What this does is it creates an invisible directory, a hidden directory within your folder structure called .git. And if I look at it, ls-al, for those Mac or Linux users, right, you can see that it exists. Here's my .git folder, right? Windows does the exact same thing. It just hides it. And the only way you can see it on the Windows system is if you expose your files and folders that are hidden, right? So you have to do that as an option in Windows, right? But this is where it saves all the version control information. This is where your repository lives. If I want to kill my repository locally, I just have to kill this folder, and then there is no git for my project anymore, right? Sometimes I need to do this though to fix things too, by the way. All right, so again, clear. If I do a regular list, you can see that I don't have anything. It doesn't show my git folder because it's hidden. All right. Now, so the first command is done. Git init. I've initialized my Git repository. Number two, I need to add all the current files to something called the staging area. The staging area is a middle step. So before I do a snapshot of all my files, I got to indicate to Git which files I'm going to put to this, kind of put up to the staging area, right? And I got to kind of mark those files somehow. Now, there's different ways to do it. You can do one file at a time, or you can do something like this: git add dot, and then press enter. This adds all the files that I currently have into the staging area, right? I still haven't done a commit yet, and that's the next step. I got to say git commit -m, and then initial commit. If I can spell properly. And again, it's either the best practice is either initial commit or first commit. Either one of those is fine. But this is the first time I'm creating my Git repository, and that's what I want to put in. I'm going to indicate this is my first commit, right? Then press enter. What this does is it has now created our first snapshot or commit, right? This commit or snapshot is only local. It has no connection to the cloud service. I need to create that connection. That's what I'm going to do next, right? In fact, these last two lines here, right? I can just copy paste these two lines, right? And I'll explain what they do. So if I copy paste these two lines and press enter, and again, this works on Windows and Mac, it's going to do two things. One, it's going to add a remote. The remote is the remote service, in this particular case, GitHub, right? The remote is going to have a name, origin. That's what it's named by default, right? And a path, which is the GitHub path right here. This is the path to this particular repo, right? That's this line. The next line, git push, is going to take your local files and upload them to the remote, right? The -u switch is unconditional. So it'll upload all your files unconditionally up to GitHub, right? It's going to upload it to the origin remote. We named it origin, right? And it's going to put it into the master branch. That's what these things mean, right? So it's put it into the master branch up on GitHub. If I refresh my screen now, you can see that if you go to George Brown College, go ahead. You can go to George Brown College. So github.com/George Brown College, and then GAME1014 W2017 lesson 1. You'll see it. And for those people who aren't quick on typing else, I'll just drop that into Slack. There it is. There's not much there, right? Right now, it's kind of really rudimentary, right? And if you look at it, what's missing? There's something missing here. Didn't I have another directory? Am I missing something? How come it didn't go? Assets, right? How come assets didn't go up to GitHub? There's nothing inside of it. GitHub will not put anything up. Git will not send anything to GitHub, a folder as an example, if it's empty. It won't do it, right? And the reason for that is because if I look at each of these content folders right now, for example, this one, I can look at my index.html. You can see the index.html right here, right? I can also look at my content folders. I can look at my game.css, which is pretty empty, right? It's pretty basic right now. I can do all those things, right? What about if looking at an empty folder? You can't see anything in there, and Git doesn't like that, right? GitHub. Let's look at some other things that we can see here on GitHub. One of them is this commit. One commit, and it says initial commit. It's created by me 3 minutes ago, right? And you can see that it's called exactly what I named it here locally on the command prompt. To see the same thing on the command prompt or terminal, I can just type git log. That's the commit. Take a look at this. 021 EA34. What is this thing that is listed here? Anybody understand that? It's the hash, the code, if you will, for my individual commit. And each individual commit that's put up on GitHub and even locally on Git, for the most part, is unique. There's a very good chance, a very high probability that you'll never see the same Git ID or code, if you will, for any of the commits that are up on GitHub or even locally on your machine, because it's based on a hash, based on time, your machine, and a bunch of other factors. Okay? So that's how we identify each commit snapshot separately and differently, right? Okay, questions so far, what I've done. I've actually made our first commit, right? And it's up on GitHub. So what are the steps, yeah?
Why would I do this when I could just drag and drop directly into GitHub?
But you wouldn't want to drag and drop directly to GitHub for every one of your features, right?
So is this uploaded like in real time?
No. Right now, I've created it for the first time. So locally, I have my Git repository, right? Remotely, I have my GitHub, my repo on GitHub, right? They're not connected right now. I can still work locally, right? And I'm going to add more features to my code right now locally, right? I can't upload again to GitHub by dragging and dropping, right? I don't want to replace my code base on GitHub. I want to add to it. And the best way to do that is by doing commits one after the other, right? I'm going to continue to commit on my main branch for now. Eventually, in further sessions that we have together, I'm going to show you how to do proper branching, right? Merging, conflict resolution, right? All kinds of pull requests that we can do with GitHub, issue tracking, projects, all kinds of stuff. GitHub is huge. It's not just like the little thing that I'm doing right here, right? But that's the reason why you wouldn't drag and drop. You could do it, but you shouldn't, right? You should set up the stuff the way I'm showing you right now. But again, I have to say, with the proviso that there's always a million ways to do the same thing, right? So I'm not going to tell you that there's only one way. That doesn't make any sense. Any other questions around the process that I've shown you right now? So again, going back, the process is you need to set up a local Git repository first. You need to do git init. Git init initializes your Git repository. The second step is add everything that you want to add to the staging area, right? It's almost like a holding space before you put it into your repository, right? You got to almost like check mark all the files that you want to add in for this particular feature that you're adding or changing, right? That's git add dot. I'm adding everything in this case. If I only want to add one thing, like a README file, I could put in something like git add readme.md. I could add one file at a time if I want to, right? After you've added everything you want to your staging area for this commit, now you need to name the commit. Git commit -m for message, and then whatever the message is. And usually you want to have an action word. Added my avatar, right? Created, a finite state machine, as an example, or whatever else you're going to do, whatever feature or solution you're working on, okay? You want to have some kind of action word to do that, all right? Or fixed bug number 341, right? Whatever that bug is, right? You're going to be doing something with Git. And then after you've got that commit is an additional snapshot, a change from the first commit. This is our first commit right now. Every other commit is going to be compared with the first commit and previous commits, okay? Once you've got your local repository done, then you're going to connect it by adding a remote. And the remote could be GitHub. It doesn't have to be. It could be Bitbucket. It could be something else, right? In this case, we're using GitHub as the remote, and we're naming it origin, right? And the final step is you want to push to the remote, right? Pushing to the remote means you're uploading to that remote, right? And you're doing it from the command line. Any questions around the process? Okay, because we're going to do this over and over again. And if you haven't got it, don't worry. It's being recorded, number one. And number two, I'm going to do it again and again, right?
Oh,
Yes.
Is it the same for desktop GitHub?
Desktop GitHub is a little different in that it does a lot of this stuff that I'm doing with command line automatically, right? But it will do the exact same thing. It'll create your repository. Even if you use the desktop version of GitHub, you should know the backend. You should understand what's happening on the back end, right? So you understand what it's doing. It's doing exactly what I'm doing. The only thing it's doing is it's got a tool to do the same thing, a user interface. And we're addicted, unfortunately, to user interfaces, right? All right, let's continue. So we got GitHub going, and I want to add some more stuff. Now, I don't even have CreateJS downloaded or anything else. Okay, the best way for me, in my opinion, to download and install stuff is to use Node.js. Okay, now you might think, what the hell? Node.js? Why is he, I'm not going to run things on a Node server. And what is Node.js anyway? Well, let's take a look at that. Node.js I'm going to use as a tool set again. Remember, today is configuration and tool set day, right? Node.js. JavaScript, you might have learned, works great on the front end, but it also works nicely on the back end, right? It's something that they've been working on for several years now. For the most part, 90% of sites, or I would say 80-something% of sites, is all PHP on the back end right now, right? Not that PHP is a great back end server-side technology. I don't like it, right? But it doesn't mean that it's not there. It's prevalent everywhere, right? PHP everywhere, right? But there's the rise that's happening over the last few years, the rise of JavaScript on the back end. And in fact, JavaScript everywhere. JavaScript on the back end, JavaScript as a database with MongoDB and other NoSQL databases. JavaScript is running everywhere. With Node.js, what it allows us to do is create the ability for us to download and install packages to our system. I'm not going to use it as a server. We could. We're not going to do it that way. I'm just going to use it for the Node package manager that I'm going to get. So let's download and install Node.js, right? Now, if you're a Mac person, I highly recommend you download and install Node.js with Homebrew. So install Node.js with Homebrew, Mac. And if you look that up, there is a little tutorial on how to do this right here. And the reason for this is because if you're a Mac person, you need to use the sudo command or sudo command, depending on how you want to pronounce that, right? And you don't want to do that every single time you do a command with Node.js, right? So I recommend you download and install Node.js if you're a Mac person with Homebrew. Okay, I'm not going to do that right now because there's only a couple of Mac people in the room, right? But for the most part, for most people, if you download and install Node.js, and if you're going to ask me which one, either one is fine. I'm going to use this side, 7.4.0. What it'll allow you to do is do something like this. npm install, and then I can install whatever package I want. I can also use it to install a little server to test my code with, because as we move forward with our web game, we're going to need something of a server to test everything with, especially when we preload stuff. You can't just double click on the file index.html and have your game run. You need to run it somewhere in a local server. There's a couple ways to do that. One is you can download a server, a little server like WAMP, XAMPP, MAMP if you're the Mac, as an example, right? But Node.js allows us to do a little server. We're going to set up a little server with Node.js as well that allows us to serve up and browser sync with our web game. Okay, when I say browser sync, it's automatically going to sync up. Whenever I make a change, bam, we're going to see it up online, right? Immediately. And that's kind of a really great way of testing. It speeds up your testing. Okay. But in order for me to do that, I have to install Node. I got to install a bunch of other little packages, and then we can get going with everything else. Now you might say, wow, this is all this stuff to create my web game. Do I really need to do this for JavaScript? No. You can go and grab everything manually if you want. We just don't do that anymore, right? So here's what you can do. So once you've got Node installed, and if I can go npm-v, npm is the Node package manager. It allows me to install additional functionality on my command line, right? Some functionality like automation that does things like minifies your JavaScript files, minifies your image files. Not just minification, but also compilation and a bunch of other things, right? So again, we can download and install additional tool sets through npm. So have you guys done your Node.js and stuff? For people who are watching, it's okay. Again, if I'm going too fast, or if you decide, I don't think I want to download and install Node.js, I just want to watch, right? Watching isn't going to teach you anything. Please do this with me, because it's going to make it easier. Now, if you're someone who wants to watch and learn or watch and see what's going to happen, right? Because some people will learn like that as well. Stick around for a second. Worst case scenario, I'm going to build my boilerplate, and you can go up on GitHub and download it. That's the other way to do it. If you really don't want to do anything like this, right? Or if you're, you get a little bit of a trepidation when it comes to the command line, it's okay, right? Because I'm going to put it up on GitHub in a second anyway. All right, so I've got NPM and Node. And again, it doesn't matter whether you're on Windows or Mac, right? You can see that I've got that installed there as well. Mac's a little slower. I'm running in a VM, just like the machines in front of you, right? Slightly different versions. I got a more recent version here locally on my Mac. And what I want to do is I want to npm install something called Bower. And I want to do it in the global space. Whenever I do npm install anything, I'm actually installing packages into my onto my command line. I want you to think of it like that, right? So I'm giving more additional functionality to my command prompt, right? -G, the -G switch says it's global. If I leave the -G switch out, it's only local to the project, right? So it's not installed globally for all projects, just for that project. This one I want installed globally. And if I press enter, it's going to go out, npm is going to go out to the web, grab Bower, right? Which is another package manager for the web, and install it globally on my command prompt. That's the next step. And for you guys, if you don't know what Bower is, and most of you won't, go to bower.io. Bower is the package manager for the web. There's other ones. Webpack is a really popular option these days, and others, right? But Bower is a great little package manager. And if you don't know what a package manager is, right, that's okay, right? If you're someone who's a Visual Studio person, you'd remember NuGet. The NuGet package manager allows you to go and get packages and install them into your system, right? What's the equivalent for Java? There's a package manager for Java. What is it? You don't use it, right? Yeah, but sorry? Maven, Gradle, all kinds of other stuff out there that'll allow you to grab stuff and package stuff off, right? Okay, so we've installed our package manager Bower locally, and it's going to be looking something like this, right? Now I'm going to clear my screen. CLS for on the Windows side. Okay, so I've got my Bower package manager. I need to do one more configuration on my project. What Bower will do, it's going to install packages in a default folder called Bower Components. I don't want it to go there. I think it's a really ugly place to go. I want all my packages to go into my scripts lib folder. I don't have my lib folder, but that's where I want it to go, right? So I need to tell Bower that's where I want everything to go. And so I need a configuration file for that. So I'm going to right click here and I'm going to go new file. I'm going to call this bower.bowerrc. .bowerrc. And to start my configuration in Visual Studio Code, I'm going to put a couple of brackets. And if I press Control Space in Visual Studio Code, it'll allow me to pick the directory, which is what I want to change for Bower. So instead of it going to the default Bower components, I want all my packages that I download from my project to go into scripts lib. Okay. That's the first. So that's another step for Bower. So Bower, first of all, I have to install Bower through npm, right? And the second step is I got to configure my .bowerrc file so that it points to the right folder. Okay. Again, don't worry if you can't remember this being recorded. You can always look back at the recording and say, what did he say again? There it is. All right, that's number one. 2, I need to run if I want to keep track of all my dependencies for my project from a package perspective, I want to create a bower.json file, right? That kind of indicates almost like a manifest again for my project for all the packages that I've installed for it. And the way to do that, of course, is to run a little wizard that's packaged in with Bower by using Bower init.
Oh God, let him out.
The wizard.
That was too obvious.
I love it. The wizard will actually ask you some basic questions. It's okay just to accept all the defaults. You can add or change your bower.json file later. What does this do? My bower.json file indicates the home page for my Git repository, the author names. If there's more than one, you can add more, right? any common ignore files that we want to ignore, right? As well as a description for my project if I want to put it in there, right? But it also keeps track of my dependencies for my project from a package perspective. And I'm going to have like 4 dependencies right now. I'm going to install easel.js. I'm going to install sound.js. I'm going to install tween.js and preload.js. All those are going to be packages, JavaScript libraries that I'm going to download and install and put them into my project, right? And I'm going to do that with Bower. First of all, if I didn't know how to do it, Bower, which is a great package manager, has the ability for you to search for packages, common packages like jQuery and Bootstrap and anything else you want to use in your web projects. So if I go Bower search, and if I search for create.js, right, I can see that it'll come up with whatever it comes up with. So here's the ones that I want to use: tween.js, easel.js, sound.js, and preload.js, and they're all housed on Git. So they're all open source. You can actually go to each of these Git repositories and look at all the code on the back end that I'm going to load in today, right? I want to do it in this order: easel.js, tween.js, sound.js, and preload.js. I want to add all those into my project, right? Because those are the things that are going to power my project up. Okay. So Bower install, oops. And then we'll just do one for now, easel.js. And then we're going to use the switch --save. --save, what it does for us is it kind of says that this particular package is a dependency in our project. And let me just make sure that I've spelled it properly. I think it's easel.js, capital JS. I'm going to go out there and grab everything and install it inside scripts lib. All right, so I've just gone and done the same thing that I would have done if I went to the create.js folder, libraries, grabbed it, downloaded it, put it there, and installed it into my project. It just does it in one step. Now, you might say this is a bit of a configuration headache, but once you've done Bower and NPM on your system one time, it's always there, right? So you don't have to do it again. Let's do the rest, and you can actually chain everything together to install all at once if you want. So I can say something like this: Bower install, right, tween.js. I can also install sound.js and preload.js --save. And it'll install all those packages all at once. That's another reason why I want to use Bower. Now it gets the latest version of these packages that installs them inside your project. Let's take a look. So here's my libraries, right? And you can see that I got easel, preload, sound.js, and tween.js right here. And now they're installed in my project. Now, for those people who are waiting for me to upload to the next build up on GitHub, okay, it's okay. It's going to be up there with everything. So you don't have to do all this work. And that's why I'm doing it for you. I'm giving you an option to say, Tom, I don't really want to do all this Bower, stuff. I don't want to do NPM. I just want to get your boilerplate and go from there. Fine. By the way, this works with Phaser. This works with all major frameworks out there. They're all up on GitHub. They're all somewhere where you can download or install. Okay, so we've got easel.js, tween.js, sound.js, preload.js here, but I need to bring them into my manifest. My manifest is my index.html. Right now, all I have is my game.js file. Now, if I'm going to install these things, where would I put the script references? Should I put them after my JavaScript file or before my JavaScript file? Or does it even matter? Before is the right answer. So I'm kind of going to go up here, make some space, and I'm going to take this script file that I have right now and copy it a bunch of times, just so we can do it quicker. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So there's 4 spaces that I'm going to put in I'm going to just change the path for these files right here. Now, the one thing that I don't like about Visual Studio Code is you can't drag and drop the path. You can do that very easily with Visual Studio. Visual Studio being Microsoft's flagship IDE, right? But again, it's 70 million lines of code, so it gives you additional functionality that I don't have here. So either I have to type it by hand by going into scripts lib, easel.js lib, and then picking the right module, which is easel.js-0.8.2.min.js, right? I could do that, or I could right-click, copy path, right? And then in here, I'm going to replace this. And I got to remember how to do this properly because it's going to be specific to my computer. I have to take some elements out. So here's my path. It's really, really long. I don't need all this because this is all specific to my computer. Users, Thomas, desktop, la, la, la. right? And I'm just going to put it in the dot. And I'll do the same thing for the other ones. So I'm just going to do that really quickly. Copy path. And again, I'm just going to copy all this in there. And you might like, well, I don't know, why can't you just type it by hand? Sure, I could, right? But why? I don't want to bore you, right? If I haven't already, right? So again, for Sound.js, there's a bunch of options for Cordova if you're making a mobile game, right? There's also for Flash, but the main one you want is Sound.js.0.6.2. And the last one is preload. Preload, again, allows us to load up all of our assets ahead of time. So it makes our web game more performant. Okay, we got all our assets. You know, now we have to test that we have everything. One thing is to install them. The other one to just do a little test. And we're going to do that right now by changing our JavaScript file. Now, question for you guys. Should I do a commit? What would you do? This is your file. This is your game. And I don't want to time out here. But you're doing stuff. Should you do a commit now, or should you wait until I do a little test? What would you do?
You should save as much as possible.
I like your thinking. What do you think? Commit. James, you're the other technical lead? No idea? You don't do this stuff.
Always save.
You're going to do it this. Here, I want you to learn how to do it. It's a good skill to learn no matter what you're building, right? I would recommend save, for sure, right? Some people, what about putting it up to GitHub? Should I push to GitHub immediately, right? It really depends on your style. What are you thinking?
I push it as soon as I can, but if you can do it easily, sure. If you can't, then maybe not.
Here's the way it goes. If you do a bunch of little changes locally, and then let's say you're going to walk away, that's a good time to push, right? For us, what I'm going to do is I'm going to push as often as I can. It's not wrong to do that, right? It just sometimes it's not possible, right? Because for whatever reason, I mean, there might be a process that you're following or something that you're doing that's going to prevent you from pushing every single time. Okay, let's do this. So I want to push remotely, and this is the second thing I'm doing. So I'm kind of clear. I've added those things to my, to my project. So now I'm going to say git add dot, right, which is going to add all those new files I just downloaded and installed into my project, right? The next step is git commit, right? Git commit -m for message, and I'm going to say added, create.js suite of libraries. You can make the commit as long as you want, but recommendation is, I think it's under 30 characters or something like that. And then press enter. This is going to basically postmark or checkmark all the files that I want to put to the staging area. Right now, I've created a commit locally. I go clear, and if I go git log, now I have two commits. I have the first one, which was my initial commit, and I have the second one, right, which is the commit that I just added, create.js suite of libraries. Hold on a second. Should I have a change automatically on GitHub? Should I have more than one commit? If I refresh, should it be here? How come? I haven't pushed it, and it's not linked. GitHub and Git are two different entities. Git being the local repository, GitHub being the remote cloud service that we're housing all of our stuff. I know I'm being a little bit slow here, but the reason why is because people still have a confusion around what's Git and what's GitHub. They're two different things. I now need to push. Now, there's a couple ways to do this. I could do the command line push, right? The command line push would be something like this: git push origin master, right? What does this mean? I want to push or upload to the origin remote, that's what it's called, right? To the master branch. I could do it this way, right? The other way to do it with Visual Studio Code, it has a GitHub integration. Notice on the left-hand side, this little GitHub symbol, right? And if I click onto it, I have the ability to go into my ellipses and push. Now, this is kind of the halfway step. It's not really a UI tool if you're using the desktop tool, right? It's kind of in between, right? If you really want to do it this way, and I do it a lot too, I just push here locally, right? But for now, I'm just going to use the command line to do it. Just press enter. Now, if you haven't set up your command line with your credentials, it will ask you to log in just like it would have done the first time. It'll say, please put in your username and password for GitHub, right? You can change that by altering your credentials locally, and you can do that with git config. And we're going to talk about that later on. Okay, now it's pushed. Let's take a look at this. If I refresh, you can see now that I have a bunch more stuff in here. I still don't have my assets folder in here though, right? I don't have my assets folder because there's still nothing in there, right? Are we good on this stuff so far? Anyone have any questions on what we've done? We're not done yet. Let's do a test. A little test for CreateJS, then we'll stop for the day, all right? So here's my feature I want to add. I want to make, here's what I want to do. Here's the user story. I want to make a label that says hello world, and I want this label to spin, animate, right? 60 frames per second. And I want to do it on the canvas, right? That's what I want to do, okay? And I'm going to use just Easel.js primarily to do this. No sound right now. How? I need to go into my JavaScript, right? So here's my game.js folder, or my file. I've got this little file right here we're using for testing. I'm going to wipe it out for now. Here's my first things I'm going to do. I need to set up a couple of things. One is a function that gets called when I first start. I'm going to call this function start, okay? We name functions. We use the function keyword when we build JavaScript functions. Functions are collections of code that we can call all at once. It's almost like little sub-programs that we call that we can reuse over and over again. Okay, forgive me for those people who know what functions are and methods and all that kind of stuff. I'm really reaching out to those people who aren't great at programming, okay? So function, we're going to call this capital S start. And I'm going to put it in curly braces. Curly braces is indicating that all the lines of code that belong to that function, anything that's inside the curly braces, between the curly braces. Again, this is review for those people who've just done a little bit of JavaScript. Or maybe if you've never done JavaScript before, you won't know what this is. But hold on a second, Tom. I've got two things. I've got function out here and a function here. I've got a function within a function, right? This is very common in JavaScript. Don't be afraid of it, okay? We do functions within functions within functions within functions, and we'll keep doing that over and over again. It's like almost like calling, actually it's called callback hell in some instances. Don't be afraid of it. It's just part of JavaScript. All right. So I've got my function start. And inside there, I want to do a couple things. I want to initialize my canvas element. I want to kind of link or make a reference to my canvas element on my index.html page, number one, right? So this is what I want to do. I want to make a reference, you know, to the canvas element, right, on the index.html page. This is my little pseudocode, right? That's what I want to do. Okay, the next thing I want to do is I want to set up the stage, and it's CreateJS stage container. Right? The stage container is almost like a container that's going to live inside of your canvas where your game is going to function. Okay? So those are the two steps I want to start off with. I need a reference to the canvas element, and I'm going to create this as a variable that lives inside this function. So I'm going to say var for variable. I'm going to declare a variable. Again, there's other ways of doing this, called canvas, right? And I'm also going to declare a variable called stage, right? So canvas and stage, right? Inside of my start function, right? I'm going to do the following. I'm going to say canvas is equal to document. I'm going to actually access the document model, document.getElementById. You can see how Visual Studio Code is helping me code. Get element by ID, and we're going to access the canvas ID. Because remember, on the index.html file, which is right here, you can see that I've created a canvas element. It's my canvas element with an ID of canvas, right? So all I'm doing is I'm reaching out to my index.html and creating a reference to the canvas element that's going to be housed here. So canvas is representational of the physical canvas on my index.html page by doing this. 1, 2, I need to make a stage. Stage is equal to create.js, right, dot stage. And by the way, where am I getting all this stuff? Where is create.js.stage? How do I code this stuff? And if you don't know what you're doing, well, if I go up on create.js again for a second, and if I look at the API for my library, right? So here's easel.js, which is what I'm going to be using, right? If I go learn more, or click on that for a second, if I go to docs, you can see that under docs, I have some examples in here of how to set up the module. So stage is equal to create.js, S with a capital S, and then whatever the canvas is called. That's what I need to do. Here's an example of code to make, to kind of set up my stage within my canvas. Let's do that. So it's dot stage, right? And I need to make it a new stage object. So I'm going to have to use the new keyword, right? And I'm going to pass in the canvas element. And if you notice the code here, exactly what I'm doing here. This is where I'm getting the information. Actually, the best Create.js book is online, right? All the documentation for Create.js library is online, right? And it's pretty good. So this is the first thing I want to do. Okay, next. I want to set up something called a ticker, right? And this is going to replace a timer, if you will, to set up my my event loop or my game loop, if you will, right? I want to create a game loop that fires or triggers 60 times every second, right? Now there's different ways of doing this. You can do it manually with JavaScript, but I'm going to use something that's built into Create.js, right? And if you notice in here, with some of these examples, I'm going to use the ticker object that's part of the Create.js library. So I'm going to say something like this. So Create.js ticker, right? Frame rate is equal to 60. So this is going to set the frame rate to 60 FPS, 60 frames per second. What's the frame rate? What is that? What do I mean by the frame rate? Why am I calling it frames? Because you guys did frame-based. You guys did frame-based animation by now, yeah? You guys have covered that. This is what it's going to do. It's going to trigger the loop. It's going to trigger. It's going to listen. Every tick, if you will, is going to listen 60 times a second, right? Now, we need to also create an event loop on tick. We're going to call something called game loop, or we're going to call update, actually, is what we're going to make it call. We're going to call update. We don't have update. There's nothing that's called update right now in our code, right? So this is called the update function every frame. And that's what we're going to do. That's what this function does right here. This is what this call does. But we don't have an update function, right? So we need to create one. And then after that, after we call that, start the game. Right? We don't have the game function yet. We're going to make one. Okay? So those are the things that we're starting off right now. So start the game. Start the game. Okay, let's make the game loop function the update. So function update. This is going to be called every frame. So called every frame. Inside my update function, all I want to do here is I want to call the stage object, and I want to do its own update. Stage the update function, and again, if I go back to the documentation, you can see that the update function is built into the stage object. So it's going to clear the stage, it's going to wipe the canvas, and re-render everything on the canvas when I do the update. Okay, that's what it's going to do. Or redraw everything. And then I need to go to my game. So here's my game, so function game. And in my game, this is where I want to do my console.log for now. Game started. Okay. Need one more thing. But all this is nice, but will it work right now the way it is? How come? Why are you shaking your head? Why will it not work? I'm not doing anything. I'm just setting a bunch of functions up. I didn't call the start function yet. I need to call it, right? And there's a couple ways to do it. I can just call it down here, right? Or I could call it on load. So I'm going to go window, on load. I'm going to use a little file, and I'm going to call the start function. So when the window loads, it's going to call the start function. That's what this means, right? Now it's going to call this. It's going to make a reference to the canvas, create a stage container, right? Create a frame rate, right? Start ticking every frame and update the stage. And then it's going to eventually call the game, and it's going to start running. If everything goes well, right, I should not get an error if I run the code right now. Let's try it out. Can I double click at this point and make it work? And the answer is yes, because I'm not really doing anything graphically. I'm not preloading anything, so I should just be able to double click my project and it should work. So I'm going to kind of minimize everything again, minify everything. And I go into my project folder and I double click, and I should see no errors. I should just see this. And if I right click and go inspect, there should not be, if I did everything correctly one day, any errors on the console, and it's just to get started. I don't see anything in here, right?
How is it between ones, like if it's in the update?
I'm not calling my game function every update. I'm only calling it once. If I look at my code, right? If I'm only my code, my update function is just updating the stage. Nothing's happening on the stage right now. All it's doing is it's just refreshing the stage every frame, and it's going to do this forever, right? Okay, remember what I want to say. I want it to print out, and we're running out of time, but I want it to show my hello world on the stage. And if I want to rotate it, I kind of got to make it global up here. So I'm going to kind of create a variable really quickly called hello label. Here's my variable. Again, variables are just containers for data, right? What I want to do down here is this. Inside my game, right? I want to say something like this. Hello label, right, is equal to a new create.js.text object. Now, text objects for create.js require three things. They require the text itself, right, which is hello world. And the next object it needs is the font that you're going to be using. The text object, right? So I need to use what size of the font it's going to be and so on. I'm going to use 60 pixel consolas just to make it easy, right? The last object that it needs, last parameter that needs to be filled in here is the color. And we're going to make it so it's 000000, which is black. Okay? I've created my object. Will it show up on my stage? This way. No, because I haven't added it to my stage. My object is just an object that's been created in memory right now. The way I add things to the stage is stage.addChild, and then hello label. This adds my label to the stage. Where do you think it's going to add it to the stage? If you remember, we talked about web game last semester, yeah? So when you look at coordinate systems in game, where would it be? Top left, because top left is 0, 0, right? It goes to the right, X, and down Y, right? That's how it goes, which is a little counterintuitive, down Y, right? Because in Cartesian math, it's the other way around, right? All right, so this will add it in. If we did everything correctly, and if I go back here, right, and if I refresh the screen, then we should have hello world in big, bold text. Now, is this a font that I could select?
No.
Why? So it's Canvas Review 101. Why? What is it that I'm getting? Is that Corey that answered?
This is a default, I think.
What is it?
This should be the default. It should be like Times New Roman or Sans.
No, but is it something I can select? I can't seem to select it. Why can't I select the? Well, what is it? Why? What is this thing that I'm putting up there, right, in the canvas? It's not. It's rasterized text. That's what it is. It's been converted to pixels. I cannot highlight pixels. This is not a font that I have on my web page. This is not any kind of content that I have in my index.html. These are just pixels that have been formed from my text object that I've created. So this has been actually drawn to my stage. That's all that's happened. And I can't select it. It's not selectable at this point. Okay, I told you I wanted to make it spin around, right? And this is the last thing we'll do, and then I'll let you guys go. Well, there's a couple problems here. First of all, what is the focal point of my text object? My text object is a box, all right? It has a border that goes around it, like all objects that you put on the stage, right? What is the focal point or center point, registration mark, if you will, whatever you want to call it for this object? 0, 0, the top left corner of this object. So if I go back and look at this, it's up here somewhere. That means it's going to spin from here on the top left corner over and over again. Let's do that first, and then we'll see if we can, if we have time, we'll change the registration mark to the middle, right? How do we do that? First of all, where am I going to make this thing spin over and over again? Can I do it here in the game? In update, right? Because in update, that's our game loop. Our game loop using a trigger 60 times per second, right? So this is where I'm going to put it in. So in here, I kind of put a couple spaces in here. I'm going to go hello label, and that's why I created it as a global variable here, right? Because, well, global to this function anyway. Because if I didn't, if I just established the variable inside of my start function or inside of my game function, I don't have access to it inside of my update function. So hello label dot rotation, right? Let's say plus equals to 5. What this is going to do is it's going to rotate it 5 degrees, right? Every frame. It's going to be pretty quick, right? Should be 60 times per second. And if I go back and if I refresh, then it should be rotated, right? So I kind of accomplished my goal, but it's not really great. James, what should I do differently? Do you like this hello world thing spinning on the corner?
You can transform it by
I like it. I like your thinking. I could transform it, or you talking about the registration mark, right? Yeah. So how do I do that? With create.js, I have to specify that inside of it's a property of my hello label. My hello label is now an object, right? And what I'm going to do is it has some properties. A label.regex, right? A registration mark is equal to, and again, I'm remembering this off by the top of my head, so I might make a mistake here. Hello label dot get measured width, if I'm not wrong, right? Times 0.5. So what is this that I've just done? What creature have I just created, right? What this is I'm saying, hey, I have a function that's built into my text called get measured width. Actually, it's built into all objects for create.js, right? And I'm measuring the width of the object, the text object, and then I'm dividing by 2, and that's going to be my registration point. Okay, that's the first thing. Second thing, I need to do the same thing for the y coordinate. Hello label dot reg y, the registration point for the y side. I'm going to do the same thing. Hello label dot get measured height, and then multiply that by 0.5. Then I know that my screen size. I know that my screen size, right, is 640 by 480. If I want it in the middle of the screen, I want to set hello label dot x, the x coordinate, to 320, right? And I want to change my hello label dot y component to 240, because remember my screen size right now is 640 by 480, and I'm just going to put it right in the middle. This should affect the change that I want if I did everything correct. Oh man, what happened? How come it didn't work? Right? Because I probably muffed up my get measured width and get measured height. I'm telling you right now. Luckily, it doesn't give me an error. It did move everything here, but it didn't align my regex and reg-y. And why? Because I cannot remember for the life of me what regex and reg-y is. And this is, my friends, why we use TypeScript. Not just for for object orientation and everything else, but it gives us type hinting and code hinting for any library, any JavaScript library that's out there, including Phaser, right? I can't do TypeScript right now because I don't know what it is. But if I go back to easel.js, and if I want to look at my text object, right, you can see that the text object has an x coordinate, right? And if you look further down, my text object I can also change my regex and reg-y values, and look what I've done. I've made a capital R instead of a lowercase r. So that's what the issue is. I don't know what it is. I have to check, but this is the Now we should have a change. There we go. So we're rotating 60 frames per second. I'm updating the canvas. I'm wiping it. Remember, think about the canvas again as just a dry erase board. I'm wiping it off and putting it back, and I'm doing it 60 times per second. So I'm giving you the illusion that something is happening here, but I'm using frame-based animation for this thing to happen, if you want to call this animation. Okay? That's it for today. Questions? Recap. GitHub and Git. Create.js. We talked about that today and how to set up our project. And now I'm going to push this up to GitHub because now this is a feature that I've added up. So that's the last thing I'm going to do. But I'm going to stop recording this session, and you guys can go. If people who have to go, it's 10:02 now. I'm going to continue until I upload to GitHub, and I'll see you all next week. Remember, next week, we're going to start off with Game Production 2, the book, and we're going to add some other stuff. Thank you so much.